There's a lot more people getting into this field who are not physicians, and the physician's voice is slowly getting softer. Not only just direct patient care, what you can and can't do, but also the general direction of healthcare as a whole. What can I do to make the physician's voice a little bit louder? You really can't ever stop differentiating yourself. As stronger and stronger people get into the field, you will be left behind.
Welcome to Your Future in Sight, a podcast where we showcase stories featuring doctors and other healthcare professionals early in their careers.
We'll take a deep dive into their day-to-day lives, focusing on how they navigate the current landscape of medicine. Each story is personal, captivating, and uniquely crafted by their individual perspectives and experiences.
In each episode, we'll discuss their challenges and aspirations, and most importantly, their journey to give us insight into the future of medicine.
My name is Andres Parra.
And I'm Gio Campagna.
And we are your bro hosts, two friends turned ophthalmologists who enjoy learning from our peers. Let's get started.
In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Zach Stone. Zach is a pediatrician in the Dallas area. He grew up in Louisiana. We'll forgive him for that. But he's a Texan now. He graduated with honors in biomedical engineering from Texas A&M and attended Baylor College of Medicine in Houston thereafter. He completed his residency training in pediatrics at UT Southwestern in Dallas and has had tremendous success in private practice. Despite a fulfilling career after residency training, he made the unique and difficult decision to go back to school and is now pursuing an MBA at SMU. He's here to tell us about this interesting educational pivot and why he thinks it's a critical element to the future of his medical career. Okay, well, thank you so much, Zach, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to chat with us about kind of a unique topic, I think, which is the business of medicine, something that none of us really learn anything about in our medical training, and you've really taken it one step further by pursuing an MBA even after your training. So thank you for joining us. Do you mind taking just a brief minute to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, guys. So my name is Zach Stone. I am a private pediatrician in Prosper, Texas, which is about 30 to 45 minutes north of downtown Dallas. I graduated from Baylor in 2019 and then came to residency at Children's Health, which is semi-affiliated with UT Southwestern in downtown Dallas, and then graduated from there in 2022 after graduating pediatrics residency, and I've been in private practice now just for a little bit over 2 years in a suburb of Dallas. And yeah, we'll get into the details of this in a little bit, but have also recently begun to pursue a business degree through SMU in downtown Dallas.
Awesome. Well, that's a great little snippet. I can't wait to learn a little bit more about this, but let me back it up just a little bit and ask, everybody's kind of journey to getting into medicine is very unique, and some people it's a specific moment. For some people it's just, a feeling and knowing that you were better at certain subjects in school than others. What was it that kind of drew you specifically to medicine and wanting to be a doc and eventually to pediatrics too?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I feel like that's a question that all three of us and most people who are listening to this podcast probably receive quite a bit, especially in the earlier careers of medicine, especially with interviews and such. But, I probably fall into the bucket of someone who thought they always wanted to be a physician. Growing up, was around the medical field, healthcare field, not personally in terms of my family. I'm actually the first person that I can think of, and even my extended family, that's in the healthcare field. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a mathematician and then ended up staying home. But I was around healthcare because I felt like I was always in the pediatrician's office. I actually received allergy shots when I was a kid, and so I was there like 3 or 4 times a week. So I felt like I was just constantly in the physician's office. And then I had friends. My best friend, actually my best man at my wedding, his parents were both physicians, just internal medicine, a family physician in our hometown. And so I got a lot of exposure through them. And then, one thing led to another, shadowing experiences led to another. And then through high school, I was like, you know what, this is probably something that I want to do. And then going into college, similar to Gio, we were both biomedical engineers in college. I wanted to have an engineering background, for a couple of things. One, I'm a very math oriented person, but second, you think you want to go into medicine in high school. We don't really know until later on. And so I wanted a little bit of a backup plan in case, one, I didn't get into medical school, or two, I wanted to do something else. And so did biomedical engineering, and then got into Baylor, where I met y'all too, and didn't really know what I was planning on doing going into medical school. I feel like most people think, including myself, you're going to be some like world-renowned like cardiothoracic surgeon that saves the world. And then I got into medical school, and I realized surgery probably wasn't for me, and didn't really know what I wanted until I started clinical rotations. And we all had the very fortunate experience of rotating through Texas Children's, which I feel like really changed the trajectory of my career, experiencing taking care of pediatric patients, especially in a tertiary care center where you see a lot of critically ill, patients, and then what their families go through. I feel like that was super special for me, and that kind of nudged me in the direction of pediatrics. And then I went back and did another rotation there, a couple electives, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely for me. So I'm definitely, and actually, the funny part about that is, if you would have asked me, would I ever consider pediatrics prior to medical school, I would have said absolutely not. There's no way I'd ever be around kids every day. And, sometimes life is very funny, where you think you'll never do something and then you actually end up falling in love with it. So that's kind of where I've landed and how I landed in pediatrics, and also how I've landed in Dallas in private practice.
Funnily, if you'd asked me, I actually would have said the opposite. I went into medical school thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to do pediatrics. I think it's awesome. And what a privilege to rotate at Texas Children's. It's like one of those fork in the roads, surgery, non-surgery. And then that eventually pulled me away. And ophthalmologic pediatrics is a totally different beast. Totally.
It definitely takes a special person to take care of kids, for sure. And I think that, at one point or other, we all sort of flirt with the idea of working with kids, but in ophthalmology in particular, I feel like it is very, very difficult to take care of children because our exam requires patient cooperation, and it's just not something you get with kids. So.
Adults hate eye drops, so you can only imagine the torture that eye drops are for kiddos.
Yeah. So. But I remember you, even in medical school, Zach, you thought about family medicine for quite a while, and you clearly had at least a sort of an inkling that you wanted to do primary care of some sort, whether that's, with adults or with children. But take us a little bit through your thoughts as a pediatrics resident and what you wanted to do with your career. I even remember you considered a fellowship in critical care as well. So how did you land on this decision to just jump straight into practice, sort of in a suburb outside your home?
That's a great question. So I think if you asked me going into residency, I would have probably told you I was going to either do pediatric cardiology or pediatric critical care. That was the physiology and pathophysiology and a little bit of the adrenaline that I enjoyed back then, and still enjoy to a degree now. But I'll be honest, getting into residency, Jess, who's my wife, and I had our first kid going into intern year. We had our second kid second year. We also had COVID, and we were living like an hour away from the hospital, which I don't recommend.
My God.
And by the end of it, I was pretty burned out. And I absolutely love taking care of the sickest of the sick, especially children. But at the same time, I think myself and my family, now we have 3 kids, needed a little bit of a break. And it wasn't also that I disliked private practice or disliked the idea of general pediatrics. I actually really enjoyed both in terms of critical care / cardiology. And I also really enjoyed general pediatrics, even in an outpatient setting. And so the way I looked at it is, if I want to try private practice, now is the time. It's not go do fellowship and then say, well, I don't really like it, I'll come back to private practice. So the fact that I actually enjoy both gave me the opportunity and a little bit of the benefit of, hey, I can try this out and see if I like it. And so that's what I've been doing for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I guess when the opportunity arises and you can kind of look at both things equally, then like, yeah, I mean, I think it would be naive to not consider that sometimes life circumstances, your family, I mean, arguably that's the most important thing in your life. And so you have to take all those things into account when you go to make these decisions. So I'm glad you found something that, you could be both passionate about and felt pragmatically realistic to be able to do. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you've landed on a great practice that's in a community that you like, close to home. I think that's terrific. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the new things you've learned about what it's like to be a part of a business enterprise, because that's something that's very different and something we certainly aren't. We're not trained to think like business owners. And so teach us a little bit about what you learned as part of integrating your day-to-day life in a business enterprise.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I'll even specify a little bit more. I will say a business enterprise, a small business enterprise in the sector of healthcare, because that I think was the most radically changing aspect of the way I had to think about taking care of patients. Because up until when I was entered into private practice, I had the world at my fingertips to take care of patients. I had all the resources in the world, and I never had to think twice about the costs, the logistics, the, benefit versus risk, all that. You never seriously have to think about it when you're a part of big academic institutions or big healthcare facilities, because typically it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. You have lessons in it in residency, or at least I did. And, they talk about, do you really need this test? What's the benefit? How much is it going to cost? All that stuff. But until you actually take on that cost, it doesn't really personally or really affect you that much. But when you get into small business, those costs are relatively large. And so your margins are typically the same, but the volume that you see compared to a big healthcare academic center is much, much lower. So those margins affect you a lot more. And so I think the biggest, example I can give for that is just lab testing is a big one. And so thinking about the risk versus benefit, and cost to not only yourself, but to the patient in terms of what you need. Because even before I got into private practice, I don't think I'd ever heard of anything called CLIA before, which as ophthalmologists, I don't know how much y'all just order like in-house lab tests, but CLIA is a government mandated agency. I think it's actually a law. I don't know if it's where the CLIA part comes from, but the name of it, but there's CLIA waived tests and non-CLIA waived tests. And so those tests differ based on the complexity that the government assesses. And so CLIA waived tests like a hemoglobin, a urinalysis, strep, flu, COVID, all that stuff, those tests you can run in your office through a waiver through CLIA. And it takes very not minimal effort, but a lot less effort than other tests, such as a CBC, a bilirubin machine, all those things. Those are non-CLIA waive tests, and keeping up a CLIA approved lab costs a lot of money and effort. And so all of a sudden, you go from taking care of pediatric patients with all the resources at your fingertips to, hey, we can't do this because it'll put us in bankruptcy if we try to keep this up. And so that's the same thing like with newborn screens. They've continued to raise costs of newborn screens. They're like $54 a test, and you get reimbursed like a few dollars. And so those are the things that you don't really think about prior to in a large academic healthcare center. Like they typically just eat the costs or make it up in some other department to be able to provide those services to patients. But in terms of small business, you can't eat that cost. That'll put you out of business. And so that's why, when you're especially in a smaller practice or a smaller practice environment, it's a little bit almost like the Wild West of how can you get what's best for the patient done. And there aren't a lot of rules, and maybe not rules, but there aren't a lot of like just set pathways to doing things. And you can, not only with lab tests, but with getting to know your specialists and referrals, like systems in the area. You may have 10 ophthalmologists that if you just Google ophthalmology around, your practice, none of them are pediatric specific, but maybe there's one that actually has more experience just through their residency training of taking care of pediatric patients. And so they're more willing to see those patients. And the kind of crazy part about it is you don't really know who is more comfortable doing what unless you actually visit their office, they come visit you, or you send a patient there and they say they tell the patient, hey, I don't know why you're here because I can't do this. And so it's just like it's a lot of figuring out on your own, one, what service does the patient need? And two, how are you going to get it done? Because prior to small business practice, that was, like I said, your resources are limited. Or limitless. You don't have to think about how that's going to occur. You just put an order in the system and it gets done. In private practice, you have to figure out all the logistics, which is way more complex and nothing that you're really taught how to do. It really is, relationship building around your practice. It's talking with patients after they go see specialists, like, hey, did you like this person or did you not? Should I send more people there or shouldn't I? How difficult is it to get in contact with them? What's their wait times? All these things are not published anywhere. And so you just have to figure out on your own. So it's just a lot of things that it's just one of those things you have to get into it to really experience it and figure it out. And especially I'll say that, being a part of my practice has been a blessing because the people I'm with have been doing this for 25 years. And so that's been really helpful of just talking with them through things that I have not learned, just like the things I just stated, versus, trying to go out and do it all by yourself and not knowing. I mean, that would be really challenging in terms of setting up your own, like, hey, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go. I'm not going to get any help because I don't even, to be honest with you, that is a really daunting task. And if you're going to do that type of thing, you better have some type of mentorship with someone in the area of how they
that's a really great point. I think probably in many different specialties, like the amount that you're able to start a new practice brand new out of residency, out of training is incredibly difficult. And you touch on a lot of really good points here, which is that, medicine doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like you don't just like here, and this is not just for the residents and trainees listening to this, but anybody who's not in medicine. If only it were so easy as like, well, let me run 1 million tests and find out what's going on and then get to the bottom of it. There's just so many considerations. And while we want to do what's best for the patient, and that's ultimately going to be priority number one, you have to take into account what is the cost for the practice for me doing this specific procedure or test? What is the cost for the patient? What is the cost for the insurance? How much is actually going to be reimbursed? And in an economy where, reimbursements are falling across the board, inflation is going up, like you mentioned, margins just get tighter and tighter. And it's got to be especially emphasized. I know, unfortunately, some of the most important specialties like family medicine, primary care, pediatrics are some of the ones that get some of the worst reimbursement. And so I got to imagine the tightest margins. And this is like the safety net of the backbone of the health of the country. And if we take care of patients on the front end prophylactically, we can really save the economy a ton on healthcare costs. And so it's all really important to try to navigate that. I think this is why medicine is a lifelong journey, because you're not only learning what are the updates in medicine, what are the new practices that are the most important to keep up with practicing good medicine, you have to navigate the landscape of how is this going to be reimbursed. And at the same time, changing regulations in terms of what you're able to do and what, is going to be worthwhile for your practice to do. So all really good points that help me come to the next point, which is, we don't learn a lot of this in different exposures and different specialties across different centers where you might do residency, but you have decided to pursue now an MBA. I can see why you're so passionate about all these different costs, keeping them in mind, and how to, even if you weren't thinking about the business of medicine, how to integrate this to take the best possible care of your patients. So tell us a little bit more about that journey to want to do an MBA, what that looked like, and especially when you're doing it not in this linear fashion of A, B, C, D like medical school training was, but now you're doing it once you've been out in practice.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, once I got into private practice, kind of these, scenarios I've been discussing started to become more and more evident to me, probably a year in. And so a year in, I started to think about, two things. One, man, I'm really interested in all this. I feel like, talking through, I spent so much time just talking with our office manager about all this, just because I found it so fascinating how reimbursement rates occur, how do you get insurance on board, you have to, and how do like contract negotiations with them, all that occurs. I thought that was one super fascinating to me. And so I had an underlying interest just simply in the overall business model of one, private practice, but healthcare in general. Two, as you've kind of alluded to, it is an ever-changing environment in healthcare, and across the board in other industries as well. But healthcare is really changing to a degree of, there's a lot of consolidation occurring. There is a lot of third-party investing in healthcare now, private equity, all these other people. There's a lot of more people getting into this field who are not physicians, and the physician's voice is slowly getting softer. And we are slowly, maybe not even slowly, but definitely getting nudged out of the way in terms of the decision making of, not only just direct patient care, what you can and can't do, but also the general direction of healthcare as a whole. And so I started to notice these trends the first year. And so that's when I started thinking about, well, what does my journey look like? What can I do to, one, make the physician's voice a little bit louder and gain more skills that can help make me a more bridging voice between physicians and people who are strictly medicine focused and the overall business. How does this affect the bottom line, and how are we going to make this a viable business model in terms of just private practice, but also just across the board in hospitals, et cetera. And then secondly, again, as more and more people get into this field, kind of going back to almost the Wild West analogy, is I've realized you really can't ever stop differentiating yourself, because as stronger and stronger people get into the field, you will be left behind. And I feel like if you want to really have a more impactful career or journey or anything, I feel like you just have to continue to push forward. And so I kind of evaluated, I was like, well, do I want to go get more skills as a physician? Do I want to go to fellowship and learn how to, better intubate and do central lines and all that stuff, or read echoes? And then I looked at, other options. I was like, or do I want to, balance myself a little bit more? Do I want to take work on a different aspect of myself? Obviously I have the healthcare background. I have an engineering background. I was like, but I don't have a lot of business background. And so I was like, well, I could go get a business degree. And I evaluated both those options, obviously, not only from how is this going to affect me, but how is it also going to affect, my practice, my patients? Can I make a larger impact with a business degree currently, or can I make a larger impact with a fellowship? And then also, how is this going to impact my family? What does my time commitment look like? What's the financial impact look like? And so after looking at both those things, I thought about it nearly for a year. I considered it for about a year. And then one day, I feel like with most things in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And so, got in contact with, advisors and all that stuff. And that went pretty quickly, but, that's where I kind of landed. And that's what I'll say, for the people who are, this, for lack of a better word, quote unquote, behind me, meaning like you're people who are applying to medical school or in medical school or in residency or fellowship or, just getting into practice. What I'll say is, the historic thinking of, hey, I just got to become a doctor and then I'm going to be set. I feel like that was, hammered or teached into a lot of us, as we were thinking about medical school. I think that's why so many people have anxiety about getting into medical school, because I think the reward of, hey, you get to become a doctor and you get to, make a lot of money and have a nice life, all that is, still true to a degree. But what I'll caution is that is changing somewhat. I feel like you have to continue to push forward, whether that be with formal education or building your practice, stronger or bigger or more focused, or branching out or networking or thinking about insurance contract negotiations. I feel like if you are stagnant and you just say, hey, I'm going to do this certain job or procedure or see this amount of patients the rest of my career, that is a fool's thinking, because it is changing. The environment around us is changing too much. And eventually someone's going to come either behind you and do what you're doing better, or someone's going to say, you're going to start working for someone and say, hey, this isn't enough. And so I feel like, if you want to become, more and more impactful in your career, just never stop bettering yourself in terms of education or growth of what you're doing from a skill set.
We've talked to several people now about sort of similar issues, and you're not the first person to mention or bring up this concept that as a college student, you're so laser focused on getting into medical school. And then in medical school, you're so focused on getting the residency. And then as you go through residency, you've got, these fixations on things you want to learn or skills you want to develop, and then finding that right job. And then after that, it's sort of an open sandbox. There's not a lot of direction, and you kind of can take your career in all kinds of different paths, which is something that is pretty foreign, I think, to the average or normal medical trainee. The one thing I'll say, though, is that there is certainly nothing wrong with taking care of patients in any sort of healthcare system, and choosing not to expand your skills or knowledge by pursuing, an MBA. There's certainly always going to be a role for people who just, want to go to work and take care of people. But you're right. Ultimately, it's sort of a sinking ship from a public health standpoint, because frankly, the only thing that is consistent in our sort of business of medicine is that every single year, every single thing we do as physicians is reimbursed less and less. And every year, our cost of goods and services goes up. So this idea that, to do a cataract surgery, we receive X amount of dollars, but every single year, the cost of the supplies to perform that surgery, the cost of the salaries for the employees who work at the surgical centers goes up. I mean, it's
not
sort
to
of
mention
ridiculous.
that the standards of the patients and what they expect out of their vision,
or just
up.
their care, regardless of the service. But exactly, the point is just simply that there's these trends that are both going in very opposite directions, right? And so I'd like to know a little bit more about what you're learning in your MBA program. I know you just started it a couple of months ago, but are there any other physicians or soon to be physicians in your class? Are there classes that are devoted specifically towards small medical business, or kind of what are the things that you're learning?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I will admit this coming week is my first week.
Oh, okay.
But I've been doing a lot of prep work, and they had us doing a bunch of pre-assigned work, etc. However, whenever I was applying, they said, "Hey, we actually just had a physician graduate. Why don't you get in contact with them and kind of talk through things?" And if I recall correctly, he was a family physician, and he wanted to do it because he owned his practice, I think, with a few other partners, and they had a few different business ventures, like branching off their just like direct patient care in the office. So they had like a home health branch, they had like a medical supply branch, et cetera. And so he wanted to learn and gain the knowledge of how do I effectively run all this, because all of them were physician trained, but none of them really had an idea how to effectively run the business. And so that was helpful, and he kind of gave me some insights like, hey, this is what you're going to learn. This is what you're not going to learn. This may be, if you're looking to do X, Y, and Z, then I'd take these classes, those types of things. And so then one of the reasons why I actually chose SMU is they are developing this kind of healthcare leadership cohort, and it takes different leaders across healthcare systems in the DFW area, brings them around for fireside chats, and just kind of gets those minds together and allows people who are in the program, especially the healthcare related ones, to actually meet these people and just talk through what is the healthcare ecosystem look like in the DFW, and what's y'all's vision for the next 5, 10, 50 years. And so that was one of the draws for me, because it would allow me to just start to mingle with different healthcare type arenas or sectors in the DFW area and get to know different thought leaders in the area. And these are, outside of just physicians, these are, healthcare or hospital leadership or, biotech, healthcare, venture capitalists, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just kind of gets those people together and starts chatting about, what's next for the DFW area. And so that was really cool for me. That was a good opportunity that I thought I could take advantage of. And that was a big draw. And I think from what I've seen in terms of the curriculum and talking to other people, it will be a pretty finance heavy type MBA. You can do, there are MBAs for healthcare providers specifically, like they have those around. And I specifically did not do that. I did not want to say, hey, you look at my resume, I am, I was doing biomedical engineering. I became a physician. I'm in healthcare. And then I don't want someone to say, well, or not even someone to say it, but you're always healthcare. And so I wanted to do something where I got more of a well-balanced, even a little bit more focal area away from healthcare, because the way I thought about it, I was like, well, I know the healthcare. You don't need to teach me that much about healthcare. I'm in it every single day. I want something that I'm not going to learn in my current role. And so that's where I kind of wanted to go more of the finance heavy, because that's something that I've never learned. And so I wanted that to be more of a rounding out of my skill set.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's really great. I mean, you mentioned, and this is an important thing to think about. It's like, yes, you got to differentiate yourself from the crowd somewhat. There's going to be actually, in realistic numbers, there's going to be more people retiring. So there is going to be more opportunity for doctors that are graduating to have, job opportunities. But that being said, I think you're totally right with the way reimbursements are getting cut. Cost of everything, labor, goods is going up, and the margins get tighter and tighter. If you don't really know how to navigate that landscape, you're just going to be out in open water, open ocean. And so the other thing that I think is really nice that you've mentioned too is like, as physicians, in some degree, we are losing our voice at the table. And so I appreciate that you're finding ways, because you can either choose to go the route of private practice where you have more say and you obviously are going to need more time and investment to making the business decisions on a day-to-day basis. You can, for some people, it's a better fit to go more academic or go to a more massive corporation where they have to think about the day-to-day decisions less, and they can focus more. They don't have to go home and worry about like, is this leak in the roof that I have to think about, or the cost of this testing? It's more automatic. But at the end of the day, the more you kind of outsource some of those responsibilities, the less of a voice you're going to have when it comes to the decision making. And so I really appreciate that you are taking kind of like that mantle on for yourself to be a spokesperson for physicians, for pediatrics, and so that you can help shape the future of medicine. And so that's a really lofty goal. I have to really commend you for it. And then I wanted to, this is always be something kind of do with everybody, but I know that and you've kind of alluded to this, you're a biomedical engineer, you're a physician, now you're going to learn a bit about finance. So clearly medicine is not your end all be all. That's not your whole identity. You're a family person too. You're a dad of many kids. And so I have to ask, just for fun, if you weren't practicing medicine, what do you think you'd be doing today based on either a hobby or something else that interests you? What do you think would be what you'd be pursuing if it wasn't for medicine?
That's a fantastic question. And I feel like sometimes in our darkest days in the hospital, that question gets thought about a lot. So, if nothing else mattered, reimbursement, lifestyle, even the sense of feeling like you are doing good. If none of that mattered, if you ask me what I want to do, what is my favorite thing to do in terms of what could I do for work, I love math so much. I would 100% be a mathematician and not think twice.
That's pretty in a collegiate setting, or
like an academic setting, like a statistician, like a professor,
like Goodwill Hunting,
like a professor, type.
Just that's
funny. I absolutely love math.
Yeah, I think it's funny. There's a lot of people that echo very similar thoughts. For one reason or another, I think people in medicine sort of all have generally very similar interests outside of medicine, or all just into math and science, and even then, that even the more creative types usually tend to say something like, I would rather be a chef or an architect, which honestly isn't all that far off from what we do in terms of the passion that you have to have and the amount of work you have to put into your craft and how difficult and laborious this thing can be. So,
but it is interesting because across the board, I feel like we have gotten the response of, this is what I'd like to be doing, but like and we talk about and like, what's the future of healthcare look like? And there's some things that are, kind of like a little bit depressing, to be totally honest. But at the same time, everyone comes back to like, I'm doing what I should be doing. This is my calling. And I think that's a really good resonating point, that like somebody has to be taking care of patients and doing what we're doing. And we're happy to be doing it. So we really are privileged in a lot of ways. But Zach?
I'll play devil's advocate here for a second. I don't have children, but both of you do. Would either of you recommend, not truly recommend or insist that your child become a physician? I certainly would not.
Oh, I did not realize that's where you're going with that. Gee, that's so hard.
Yeah, it's tough. But I would not.
Many layers to that question.
Become a doctor.
There's a lot. And the thing is too, Andres, I don't know how old your kids are, but I think
she's 11 months
as well. So, okay, yeah. So you're talking about 22 years in the future. What does the landscape look like? I would say I try to tell myself not every day, but every time I think about it, I was like, I really just want them to do what they love, as long as it's a viable life. And so if they wanted to become a physician, I would 100% support them. And I will, and on that point, I think.
But knowing what you know, and they don't know what you know, right?
Yeah. There is a negativity bias to human nature. Like we always want to look at the downside of things. And we're on here talking about a lot of the downside of things. To that point, we're all in medicine and we're all in practice, outside of academic institutions. And so, yes, is it becoming harder? Absolutely. Is the reimbursement rates maybe not as good as they used to be? Absolutely. Is this a nice life? Yes, it is still a great life because you still get to take care of sick people, and the reimbursement is still higher than a lot of other things that you'll find out there. And so you get to enjoy, one, doing good for other people, and two, you still get to have a nice, comfortable life. So yes, we're talking about the doom and gloom, but it could be a lot worse. And so, yeah, if they want to become a physician, absolutely. I'd say go for it. Here's what I know, and I'll tell you what maybe, what the future looks like. But the grass always seems greener on the other side. And so if you went and talked to people who are in other industries, they'd be like, oh, I would do anything to be in healthcare or be a physician. So
I feel pretty similarly to that, in the sense that, I want her to be happy and I want her to do what makes her happy.
Yeah.
It's interesting seeing too, it's like a lot of people that, would really want to encourage their kiddos to do that specific field of medicine. Like if Gio and I are private practice and we become, owners or partners in a practice, that's in a degree a legacy and an inheritance that you can give your kiddos to join you and take up the field that you're a part of. And certainly if she had to choose anything, I'm pretty biased, but like ophthalmology is pretty awesome. I'd love for her to do that. All that being said, sometimes I think about like the day in and day outs of what I had to do during training, like the late nights, even in ophthalmology, I swear we take all, the late nights, the events that are missed, the times that, maybe something an attending said to me made me a little bit emotional because it just makes you question your whole identity. I don't know that I would want her to do that unless it was like absolutely her passion. And so that's the theme that we're finding is like everyone that's answering that is like, this is my calling. This is what I need to be doing. And I feel the same way. But if it's not your calling, like you said, there's so many other ways. If you are interested in like being very wealthy and financially successful, medicine's not it. That's not what I would recommend for the people that want to be like, if you are thinking about in college or about doing medicine because you want to be wealthy, this isn't it. Like go do finance. There's shorter ways, tech, engineering, things that are blowing up for sure. Tech sector. So don't go into this for the wrong reasons, but if it's your calling, if it's like what she wants to do, man, I'm going to support the heck out of her. I want her to do the things that are going to make her happy. Sure. And if she wants to make that kind of impact on the world, then, I'm going to be her biggest cheerleader. So on that note, man, Zach, we have absolutely loved the chance to getting to chat with you. You have been an incredible guest. We've learned a lot about the landscape of medicine, what it's like for, someone leaving pediatrics and thinking about doing an MBA and trying to do even better than they're already doing. So we commend you. We're super grateful for you for coming on the podcast. To all the audience, like, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you've taken away some gems. I learn here with you. And so if you want to support us, give us a like, give us a subscribe. And again, Zach, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bud.
Good to see y'all guys. See you later.